Alrighty, welcome back, everyone. We just talked about just all of the craziness around the playoff, trying to figure out all of these SEC versus Big Ten. If it's 5 teams, is it 4 teams, is it 3 teams? Is it no? It's going to be crazy. Let's just leave it at that for the time being. It's one of those things that we'll have to keep up on every single week, and that Indiana Ohio State game could just be the domino that tells us everything. If Ohio State wins by 28, it might be much less of a headache to figure out all of this stuff. If they win by 14, the conversations get very heated in a hurry. I can promise you that, even more heated than they are right now. And if you're on Twitter, man, you've seen it. It's gone very, very aggressive very quickly. But at the end of the day, let's get into the winners and the losers from this past weekend. We'll tie a little bit of a bow on this weekend in the next 2 segments here. But let's get into this. And I think the biggest winner is just Georgia football. Georgia football is back. I mean, that is the Georgia football that we have all become relatively accustomed to. Now, wasn't quite the run game that Georgia is used to by any means, but a dominant defensive performance, a quarterback performance that they've needed for a number of weeks and need going forward, no doubt about that. And they executed. They did the thing that a lot of Georgia teams do where maybe you start a little bit slow. Maybe you're down 10-0 after the first quarter, and then you just outright decide you're going to win a game. It genuinely looks like that. It looks like they just decide that we are going to win this game. We are not losing. We are not getting knocked out of the CFP. And they were on a mission the rest of the way. They were really, really incredible. And I think the offensive line is the biggest thing for me. They dominated one of the best groups in the country, maybe the best group in the country at the defensive line position. And it was a huge piece of Carson Beck being able to find his way back into this game. It was not necessarily all that pretty to start, but he was able to get comfortable because he had time to get comfortable. And then he made that one big play where he ran for a first down, gave a little bit of a celebration, and that's when everything flipped. That was the moment where everything in that game flipped. Maybe everything in the season flipped for Georgia, but that's obviously a conversation we'll know more about down the stretch. But Georgia's here, no doubt about that, and I think a lot of teams didn't want to see that, but Georgia is likely into the CFP if they handle business against UMass and Georgia Tech. They will be in that field, and they could be in Atlanta for the SEC championship if Alabama were to lose one of these next 2 games. So a lot still on the table for this team. I think they're just one of those teams that you never want to see them, especially in those big-time games. You never want to see them, and that's why everyone outside of Athens, Georgia is a big-time loser. Let's just be totally honest. No one wanted to see Georgia win that game, and it's not to say that a Tennessee win wouldn't prove that Tennessee is the better team, wouldn't prove that they're playing better football right now. It's just to say when you see that G, when you see that block G in a big-time game, in a CFP game, and you're a team like, let's say, Indiana, or you're a team even like Texas that's had a run-in with the CFP, but hasn't necessarily gotten there to the consistency or to the level that Georgia has. Georgia has that championship DNA, and it's one of those things that is very hard to quantify. It's very hard to get a beat on. It is very real, though. No one wants to play a Georgia team that has won national titles in some of the biggest games of the season. They also don't want to give Kirby Smart an entire 3 or 4 weeks to prepare for one of these games because that's a nightmare for just about any offense they play. We saw it against Texas. You will see it again in the playoff if that were to happen. So a lot of things still at play here, and Georgia and Bama, they've been dominating the SEC for quite some time. It felt like this year there was a relatively clear path to it being Texas, Tennessee, or A&M's. It sounds crazy, but we were on a path where that was going to be the championship if Tennessee were able to win this weekend, but the big dogs just came right back. So Georgia's one of those teams that maybe they haven't been playing great football, maybe they haven't been the best team in the country, and they definitely haven't, to be totally fair, but they have that thing. They have that thing that pretty much every championship team has had over the last little bit where it's just, we know what this is about. It's what Michigan went through. They went through 2 years where they didn't play all that well, where everything was kind of sputtering in the CFP, and then it all came together because they knew what they were up against. They knew what was coming, and they handled it a lot better than their opponents. So you're in a position now where no one wants to get that Georgia team. I can promise you that. No one wants to be the team that has to invite Georgia into their place. No one wants to be the team that gets Georgia down the stretch of the season because they're on a mission now. And then we got the every Big 12 contender, big time winner, no doubt about that. BYU opened a huge door for a ton of teams. If BYU were to win this weekend, I think we would only have 4 teams that could get into the Big 12 championship. But they did fall, and now the door is open. The biggest winner to me is Arizona State. Now they have a chance to essentially a play-in game this upcoming weekend. Obviously, got to take his business against Arizona to finish the season. But as of right now, you got to be in a really, really good spot going forward, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. But as of right now, Arizona State got a huge win from Kansas this past weekend, weirdly enough, and then they're able to set up a game that could very well send them to the Big 12 championship in their first year against another team that possibly is going to the Big 12 championship in their first year in Colorado that got a win this weekend. No doubt about that. They got up to the top team in the league, at least in my mind. Iowa State relatively unaffected, but confusion always a good thing for a team that needs a couple of losses down the stretch. When things get a little bit crazy, they definitely love that. So the rest of us was given a minor shot by not a lot by any means, but you have Kansas, you have Kansas State, excuse me. You have TCU, you have Texas Tech. They're still technically in it. They're not really in it, but they're still technically in it. But on the flip side of that, because BYU lost this weekend, the two-team hopes for the Big 12 are officially gone. I feel very confident in that. BYU could win it, and go. It would be 12-1, so they would definitely be in, but no one else is getting in, especially everyone else would have 3 losses at that point. So no way anyone else is getting in from that group. And then the flip side of that is BYU wins out the rest of the way, but then they're an 11-2 team that lost in the Big 12 championship. That team's not getting in over a 10-2 Tennessee. I'm just going to be totally honest. You can call it SEC bias. I call it putting the better team in. But at the end of the day, it's going to be really interesting to watch that unfold, and I do think BYU's in a spot where if they win out the rest of the way and lose, maybe chaos could hit, but this is going to be a one-bid league. I feel very confident in that, and it's something that I've talked about quite a bit on here, and I thought that well before, BYU was not undefeated anymore. But at the end of the day, I do think it's going to happen unless absolute chaos hits. This is a one-bid league, and it ended this past weekend with BYU falling. The winner, because of that, is the 5th SEC team, because now you have at least one bid stealer that will be totally out of the equation from the Big 12. Now you're just waiting for another pin to drop, whether that's Tennessee, who tends to be that team right about now, it seems, or if you have Ole Miss, let's say, they were to lose this weekend. A&M and Texas were to would slide up a little bit more, even with the loss at the end. This thing could get crazy. Let's just put it that way. Ole Miss could still find their way back into this position. I think A&M could find their way into this spot. I think Texas will probably be the most readily to find their way into this spot, but definitely a lot of different teams that could be affected here. It feels like you're going to have 5 teams that, and maybe there's scenarios there you don't even have 5 teams that are worthy. You don't even have 5 teams that are worthy of going, but at the end of the day, right now we have 6. I can't imagine it's going to fall by too much at the end of the year, but craziness is what 2024 is about. And then for Tennessee, they need a little bit of help from either Army, USC, or Ohio State. Those are the teams that they're going to be watching over the next couple of weeks. Ohio State, they're hoping for a big win. Whatever that looks like, they're hoping for a big win. For Army or USC, just a 1-point win against that Notre Dame team would be enough for them to slide into that opening spot. So that's what they're waiting for. Whoever that team ends up being, it is Tennessee right now, but could be a different team down the stretch, and that team got a little bit of help this past weekend. The loser is the Tennessee fans' blood pressure, because you won't have answers really until the end of the season, which absolutely stinks, but you will get a good answer this upcoming weekend. Let's say Indiana loses by 14 on Saturday to Ohio State. I won't make my pick. I'm not trying to tip my pick by any means here, but let's just say that were to happen. The ranking is going to be the thing that they're worrying about. The ranking is going to be the thing that decides that if Indiana is above Tennessee in a Tuesday ranking where they lost by 14 points the last Saturday, they're going to get in. Tennessee is almost assuredly out unless anything crazy happens in the last week. They are officially probably out of this race, but there are some side doors. There are some different things that you can go after. Notre Dame falling once would be one of them. A team like Florida beating Ole Miss, or Auburn beating Alabama, or Oklahoma beating Alabama, or Auburn beating Texas A&M. A lot of different things could open up for this Tennessee team if they're able to just win out the rest of the way. But at the end of the day, their blood pressure has to be very, very high, at least for the next 7 days until that next rankings come out. And then it might get a little bit higher when the rankings do come out. But a winner is the fans of College Station, and I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself, and I feel bad. I feel like I might just be jinxing this, but there is a chance we get one of the best games that we have gotten in about a decade in college football. In a couple of weeks, there is a chance we get Texas A&M in Kyle Field at night for a spot in the SEC Championship and the CFP. Whoever loses that is out of the CFP. I feel very confident in that. Neither of those teams have the resume to get in. Whoever wins it is in the SEC Championship, and I think barring anything absolutely crazy that would really put the rest of the CFP in a very, very tough spot going forward, it would be Texas A&M finding their way into it. So it's the big game. It's a game that, just for fun, we've waited 13 years for this game to happen. Just for fun, these teams hate each other more than life itself. So it's going to be really fun. That atmosphere is going to be crazy. I cannot wait for this game. It's the game that, from the beginning of the year, I have never been more excited for one game this year than this one. We are getting it at the very end, which was a little bit frustrating to wait this long, but it's about as good as it can possibly get. The thing is that we have to remind people is they got to get a win Saturday. For all of this to come to play, for all of the stakes, for all of the juice, for all of the energy to come into this stadium, A&M's got to go on the road and win at Auburn. And Texas hosts Kentucky. They just got to get those wins. It's 2 wins that they should get. That A&M Auburn game, sketchy. But at the end of the day, we'll break that one down here, I believe, tomorrow. But there are two games they should win. If they don't, that game loses a lot of juice. If they do win, ooh, buddy, we're going to have a really, really good one in College Station, and one that might just tear down that entire stadium with how loud it's going to be. I've talked about it before. Just check the structural integrity before November 30th on Kyle Field. And then the loser is the people looking for answers, as they have been pretty much all year. Now, this isn't as aggressive as past weeks. We did get some answers. Some of the crazy scenarios in the ACC were officially put to bed. Some of the crazy teams like Washington State officially fell out with the loss to New Mexico. And then you do have the Big 12. They are going to be a one-bid league. With BYU's loss, that feels very, very confident. And then you get the other side of that. That being said, with the Big 12 losing, or with BYU losing, the Big 12 got more confusing this past weekend because there are a lot of teams still in the race, and this weekend will do a lot to answering those questions. Maybe not everything, especially if Colorado were to lose. Things get interesting in a hurry. And then elsewhere, the question is going to be how many teams and from where and all of that craziness, and it's been uniquely hard to nail down. I've gone back and forth on that Tennessee-Indiana conversation about 10 which ways from Tuesday, but at the end of the day, we will figure it all out. Someone's going to be very mad. That's something I can say without hesitation. Someone's going to be mad. Someone's going to think they got screwed. They probably wouldn't have gotten screwed, but at the end of the day, they will feel that way, and we'll see what happens the rest of the way. But definitely going to be interesting to watch this, and it's one of those things where this past weekend, it gave us some answers. It gave us some path to a little bit of a cleaner CFP picture. It's still very mucky. It's still very crazy, and that's what the 12 team gives us. So we got what we wanted. No two ways about that. But let's take a third break here, and when we come back, we got to break down the superlatives as we go into this upcoming weekend. Got to give some love to people from this past weekend. So biggest win, individual performance of the week, statement of the week, and so many more right after this. So stick with us.